How do you like my jacket? My jacket communicates. I'm an oral communication instructor, and I thought this jacket was great because it was full of words and not a single number. This podcast, however, is going to cover visual aids. It's communicating without words, but communicating with objects and things. So get that page in your workbook. It's called Visual Aid Basics and Guidelines. And then you also need the page that talks about nonverbal communication and eye communication. So have those two pages ready from your workbook. Okay, let's begin with the page in your workbook called Visual Aid Basics. At the top it says blank visual aids are often the most effective. When I say that in a classroom setting and I let the students say, what do you think goes on the line? Rarely does anybody guess what's on the line. That's because we live in a high-tech society and everyone seems to think, oh, you need a lot of eye candy. You want technology for your visual presentations. Not necessarily so. I want you to understand that in my opinion, simple things often are the best visual aids. And simple is what should go on that line in your workbook. Let me give you some examples. It says an object, a chart, a picture, a poster, a model, a map, a person. Okay, let's start with an object. What kind of objects might you use as a visual aid? Well, there was a girl who did a speech, and what do you think her speech was on? She held this little gift bag up several times. Her speech was about being an organ donor. And every time that she said, give the gift of life, be an organ donor, anytime she said, give the gift of life, she picked up her bag and equated the object with what she was talking about. She didn't show us pictures of organs, or she did show some people who had been organ recipients, but her visual aid was an object lesson. You might have a speech that has something to do with going to the Caribbean or Hawaii. And instead of having a map of the area, you might talk about the pineapple groves and show a pineapple. Or how about slice the pineapple up? And after your speech, give everybody a little sweet taste. Money. I've seen some students take money from like a Monopoly game and throw it up in the air when they're talking about something that has to do with money. But this is a $20 bill. Obviously not a real $20 bill, but you could take this, and there are several. You could pass them out or hold them up, or every time you wanted to say, and what can 20 bucks get ya? And every time you would say the word $20, you would show your audience. I'm trying to say that sometimes a visual aid isn't just shown once during a speech. Sometimes you can use it repetitively and make a powerful impact. Let's suppose I'm doing my speech I'm trying to give a tribute speech. And maybe my tribute speech is to my favorite author, Karen Kingsbury. So I might have a stack of books like this on the table when I'm giving my speech, but they can't talk for themselves. I would need to point to them or reference them in some way. Remember, a visual aid isn't really going to aid your speech unless you mention it, point to it, pick it up, show it. It needs to do something. You need to interact with that aid. Another object. This is a sign. What might the subject be or the topic be of the speech? Maybe it's all the reasons why you should join eHarmony and fall in love. Maybe it's something about planning a wedding. I've seen a few wedding planner speeches. Or what if at the beginning of my speech I say, just married, an exciting day, and then I frown and I rip it in half. Now what's my topic? My topic could be about divorce. It could be about domestic violence. So sometimes your object doesn't really refer to exactly the topic, but you can do something with it. How about this? This is actually it's a doormat, just something you would put down in front of a door to wipe your feet on. Well, my sister gave me this doormat because her birthday just happens to be September 11th. And obviously she was born long before 2001. But let's just suppose I wanted to use this door rug, for my speech at the beginning of my speech. See how many of the 12 effective types you can catch in this introduction. September 11th, 2001. Where were you on that day? or you, or you. Well, I know where the terrorists were. They were up flying planes into our buildings. They thought that they were going to throw us down, stomp on us, and keep us down. They thought they were really getting a victory, but we're Americans, and we're proud to be Americans. Now, how many of the 12 affective types did I just use? I asked a rhetorical question. I had a visual aid. I had a surprising movement, throwing it down on the ground. There was a surprising sound. Most of the time in a classroom setting, you can hear it fall, and I stomp hard. So you can take your visual aid, and right in the beginning of your speech, you can use it to be just one of the 12 affective types. But if you rip it, throw it, do something else with it. Had a young man do a speech on sweeteners, and he took a bunch of cans of Diet Pop and he piled them up into a pyramid, and when I said, "I'm ready when you are," and he started his speech, he hit the pyramid, they all went flying, and it really was attention grabbing. What if you have a flag? If you have a flag and you drape it over the podium or put it up on the wall behind you, just remember, an object is not a visual aid unless you reference it or point to it. Just to have the object standing there doesn't really aid your speech. When I was in my very beginning of my academic journey, I took a speech class at Owens Community College. We had a how-to speech. Now I live in Tennessee. I'm in the Bible Belt. But then I was up north, Ohio, northwest Ohio. I decided to do my how-to speech on how to explain Christianity so even a young child could understand it. So what do you think I used as a visual aid? I doubt you would guess. I used an umbrella. Remember, your object can be an object lesson. It doesn't need to be the object you're actually speaking about. So, at the beginning of my speech, I turned around. Where do you go when storms come into your life? A lot of people run here or there, but many people run to their religion to be a help and a comfort in the calm in the time of storm. Now, one of the things that all these groups have in common that are underneath my umbrella, they are all different areas of the Christian religion, and they all agree on the 5 basic tenets of Christianity. Okay, what did I do? I had a surprising movement, a surprising sound. I asked a question, where do you go when trouble hits you? So remember, a visual aid, you don't need to just show it. Sometimes you want to interact and do something with it. One young man, he was not so as young as a traditional student. He was about in his 40s. He had been very quiet all semester. So when I said to him, "I'm ready when you are," which is what I say in an on-site class before speeches start, he turned around, and when he came back around, he had a big orange ball stuck on his nose, and he had put red circles on his cheek. His speech was about how to be a clown, but he was generally such a quiet, shy guy that it was very surprising. So another girl started at the side and did back flips all the way across the room. You don't have to begin your speech facing the audience. Sometimes a surprising movement is really helpful. Okay, we've talked about all these objects. Let's go on to a chart. A chart, you might want to put the chart in PowerPoint, or if you're going to put the chart on a poster, the chart should be appropriate. Here's a chart, and it doesn't really have the topic obvious. It's written small. This is a chart for eating disorders, but it was very effective from the student that created the chart and did the speech. It was colorful. The letters were large enough. She took time to cut them out in a kind of fancy way. This chart worked. On the other hand, these charts didn't work so well. The lettering was too small. You couldn't even really see the pictures for most of the areas. And remember, if your audience can't see it, it's really not a visual aid. It might be visual, but it's not aiding anything. Okay, we've talked about a chart. How about pictures? If I show you this picture, what do you think it represents? It represents 9/11, but it's also kind of a takeoff on that famous picture from World War II. Now you can't see the faces in this picture, But does that matter? No. The point of this picture really isn't the faces of these men. The point of the picture is that the picture tells a story. We often say a picture's worth 1,000 words. In some instances, that's true, but people have to be able to see the picture in order for it to speak to them. So if I held up this picture and I actually wanted you to see the faces and know who these people are, you wouldn't be able to tell in a room, even if it's a small room of 15 students, but if it's a room of 24 students, you're not going to know who these people are. This gets a little better. You can see this probably is JFK and Jackie Kennedy and their little girl Caroline. That's getting better, but just remember, if you're going to show a picture, everybody needs to be able to see it, and it needs to have impact on your audience. When I was at Tennessee Tech teaching, one of the students wanted to take a stand that prayer should be returned in school. So she had this picture of this girl praying. She had other pictures of children praying. Now the reason these worked well, it was a class of only, I believe, 10 or 12 students. So they could easily see the pictures and what she was talking about. If you want to show pictures of your family or other important people, this picture would be way too small. This is my daughter's family. You'll need to put it on an Elmo or put it into PowerPoint or do something to project your picture. And don't forget, if you are in an online class, you cannot project your pictures from your laptop. You'll need to put them onto a television screen or a big screen and have it viewed there, because that way the audience will be able to see it. Okay, we've talked about an object, a chart, a picture, a poster, a model. You might have a model of, I've seen models of the spine. A girl's dad was a chiropractor. She brought in his model. Another girl, her dad was a dentist. She brought in a model of the teeth, explained to us the proper way to floss your teeth. You might have a model of a plane or a model of something else. Maybe you'll have a human model. A great speech that was done at Eastern Michigan, a girl was trying to do a speech on baby fat. It's baby P-H-A-T. It's a clothing line. And so she asked 4 of her friends to come in and actually model the jackets, the accessories, and it was a great speech, but that took advanced planning, advanced preparation. If you're going to ask people to come and model something, often you're not going to use the people in your class. Let me also mention, if you want somebody in the class to be, it says a person, you can use a person. Maybe they're going to sit and you're going to do something to their hair. A girl one time did a speech over in East Tennessee. She showed us half the face that she put makeup on and the other half she didn't. If you're going to use a model and you want it to be someone in your class for an on-site class, then be sure and don't wait until that day to ask them. A disastrous thing happened one time. A young man asked a girl, "Will you help me in my speech?" And she agreed. He was going to teach about, I think it was judo or kickboxing. They had never practiced together and she didn't know what to expect. And so she was part of his visual aid, but when he brought his foot up to kick her, she screamed and it disrupted the whole speech. So if you're going to use people, be sure and practice with the people before you get before your audience so that the people know exactly what to expect from what you're going to do. Now this is a map. Well, let's go back to the posters. Let's talk about posters for a minute. I always say this is about the good, the bad, and the ugly. First, I'm going to show you some bad. Not good. This looks like it was done by a 3rd grader. If you're going to do a poster, it should be professional. It also needs to be that you can see it clearly. The person farthest from the speaker needs to see it clearly. About the only way posters work well in a speech class is if you have a class with less than 12 or 15 people. In a full class with 24, posters often don't work well. Now they can work well on a online class because you can actually bring the poster closer to the camera. But this would still be a bad poster because this is a college poster. A college student did this, but it looks like it was done by a 2nd grader. This student used optimal colors. The most optimal color they've shown from research for your eye gate is yellow on black or black on yellow. So they chose good colors, but the writing is kind of fancy and scripty and you can't really see the writing. So this didn't work too well either. This one doesn't work because they used all capital letters. The eye gate more easily sees mixed caps. So the only place you should use capital letters are in your headings or your titles. Here is a very small poster, but it worked great in this person's speech. It's the word of. Who would put the word of as a poster? That doesn't even give you a hint as to what the topic of the speech was. But now when I tell you, this student was talking about how this amendment allows us freedom of religion, not from religion. And every time she talked about freedom of religion, she would say, and remember, we are guaranteed freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. And her plan-motivated movement and gesturing with her hand with the poster. Now this poster might not look it, but it would take me several hours to create this. There's a lot of color and a lot of detail all around the end, but it's small. Small can work if what you have on the poster can be seen by everybody in the room. This, on the other hand, is one of the largest posters that I've ever seen during a speech. And it explains my family history, and it's about cancer, and all the white backgrounds are people that have died of cancer or who have died, and the green are people that have had cancer that are still living. This was a speech on cancer, but look how huge. I'm a poor artist. I just am not a very good artist. Maybe you are, and you can do great lettering, but if not, then computer generate your letters, even for a poster or something like that. Okay, this poster worked well because, again, this was at a Tennessee Tech class. It was small, about 10 students was all, and the student held the poster right up so that the people could see. And her topic was why we shouldn't use cell phones or do texting while we're driving. So, did these posters work? In that setting, it actually did because the class was small enough that she could get up and personal, but some of these have very small writing. So she read what was on the poster. Yeah, that's all this says is yeah. But it was the last words that Emily M. Shields spoke right before she died on impact. Okay, this one says text messaging, and you see an accident. And what was the last thing on that person's cell phone? LOL, NOIMNTBZY. Okay, no, I'm not busy, but they died. Now they also add a little humor to their topic. Honk if you love Jesus. Text while driving if you want to meet him soon. Okay? So sometimes you can add a little humor to a seemingly very serious topic. This one's pretty serious. I'll read it to you. We were on the phone. I guess he wasn't paying attention to the road. I heard him crash, and I think about it all the time. Can you imagine if you were on your phone talking to somebody that was driving down the road, you hear a crash, and you find out that that person died? Was it that important that they be talking to you? So this was a very moving speech. It was very well done. Now on her side of rebuttal, she talked about how some people say we have the right to bear a cell phone. That was a takeoff on the Second Amendment. So even on a serious topic, you can add some humor. Okay, an object, a chart, a picture, a poster, a model, a map, a person. I think we've talked about most of those. I got a few more posters here. This one's of a map. Didn't work too well actually for the speech. This is a map of the Florida Keys, and the student was talking about the Florida Keys, and you could see the pictures, and the pictures were big enough and colorful enough, but the writing on the top, not too professional. Now, the number 2 on your page says, technology can be a blank resource. What kind of resource can a PowerPoint or a YouTube video clip, what kind of resource is technology? Truthfully, it's a great resource. You could put it's a great, wonderful, fantastic, but it can also let you down. So that's one of the reasons why I often encourage you, something simple that you can practice with and pick up, that can work often the best. It will require skills and extra time for you if you're going to use the technology. Number 3 says overhead projectors can introduce or emphasize a point. Sometimes you actually want words on a screen or in something that will emphasize what you want to say. Number 4, always remember, color communicates. Right here, this says Breakaway Tours. It's a tour company I used to own. It's black and white, it's simple. But if I was giving you a speech about traveling with Breakaway Tours, this would work, even though it's black and white, and tours we often think are colorful places. This was a student's speech on fair tax. And because it was a serious topic, he chose serious black and white colors. And he was very black and white about the facts about the fair tax. So this worked. But here's the deal. All of his titles were easily seen by the audience, but his smaller words couldn't be. Those were his speaker notes. So what he wanted to tell them about a balanced budget, he had his speaker notes, and he didn't really care that they couldn't read everything on his poster, but the whole class could read, or the audience could read, all the bigger things. Always remember, color communicates. Here's another bad example. This whole poster was about overcrowded prisons. And the poster looks like you're going to a circus. Too much color, way too much busyness, entirely too small of type. Remember, the color needs to go with what you're saying. And if you plan to go into international kinds of careers like banking, different colors communicate different things in different cultures. When we see purple, for example, we often think purple, oh, that's stately or queenly or something royal. In some cultures, purple represents death. Same thing with the color red or white. What we think green means is green, grass or money or ecology. What one color means in one culture might mean something totally offensive in another culture. So if you're going to be speaking to an intercultural audience or a cross-cultural audience, you need to be careful what colors you use in your visual aids, and you might need to do a little research to see what colors mean in that country or in that area. Here's the last of my bad. Color communicates. This is mostly black and white, but this was a totally useless visual aid. No one could read it. No one could understand. The pictures were too small. Posters just often don't work real well. Let's go on. Next one, you should make them big enough or large enough to be seen in the back of the room or from the person farthest from the speaker. Next, allow plenty of time. Some things take no time. How long did it take this girl to pick up this bag? Not long. Or the pineapple. All visual aids don't take a lot of time, but some, like that word of, you might spend a lot of time on a visual aid. Plan your time wisely. I also had a lady, she had gone through a really nasty divorce, and her husband was wealthy and he was a doctor, and so she gave a speech on how to be happy. She spent so much time creating these little gift bags for everyone in the class, and every bag was full of about $5 worth of candy and other things. She gave me a bag worth almost $10 worth of stuff. She put all her time into her visual aids and her bags, and yes, she did get voted by the audience as best speaker that day. She kind of bought him off. But the fact is, her speech was terrible. She spent all her time on her visual aid, spent no time practicing her speech. Balance out your time so that you still have time to practice what you're going to say, and be sure and incorporate the visual aids as you practice. Now, practice using every aid, practice. That's what it says. That's what you should do. Next, always concentrate on communicating effectively so that your aids will blank and clarify your message. Well, in that blank goes enhance, expand upon, emphasize. You want to make the message better by your visual aid. You don't want to detract from what you're saying. You don't want it to be, at the end, clarify your message and be a bunch of glittery, glitzy garbage, junk. A glitzy visual aid that detracts from your message is not an aid at all. So, make sure it's appropriate. Number 9, blank, pass any item around the classroom for your audience to look at, whether you're in a classroom setting or another setting. Don't ever pass things around while you're speaking. Now you can pass things out before you begin or pass them out after your speech, but during a speech, don't pass things around. That means the people are going to be looking at what you're giving them and they're not having eye contact with you. Number 10, talk to your audience. That's what goes on the line. Talk to your audience, not your visual aid. Don't just stand with a poster and talk to the poster, or if you're using PowerPoint, turn around, or you want to keep eye contact with your audience. So make sure your visual aid just aids and it doesn't keep your focus. Number 11, all photographs should be at least 8 by 10 in a normal classroom setting, or displayed on a PowerPoint or an Elmo or an overhead projector. You can't use small pictures, so don't bring a small picture to a group audience unless you have a way to project it and make it large enough. Number 12, do not ever use a laptop computer screen. This goes for an on-site class or on an online class. In my online classes, if you're going to use PowerPoint or you're wanting to show YouTube or use technology, you've got to project it through a big screen, like your television screen. Don't use your small computer screen. Number 13 says be sure and note all your visual aids in your outline and maps. You're to use all capital letters and bold them. Now the last thing I want to mention is you have a list of do's and don'ts for PowerPoint. If you choose not to use the simple things that we've talked about today, and you don't go simple and you go techo, be sure and read over your PowerPoint do's and don'ts so that you will not lose any points and not be ineffective by what you do. Thank you.